Long, long ago, in the days before digital, when television closed down at night and didn't even run all day, there was an idea.
Hello, children.
The idea was that children should have, deserved to have, their own television programs, just for them.
For the next few minutes, I'd like you to see some of the children's programs.
Some thought this was a silly idea, and that children were not worth talking to or listening to.
How dare you!
But others took the idea and protected it, and learned the secrets of making TV for children.
Magic. Magic.
They unlocked the magic and believed in its power.
We'll be back on Thursday.
And little by little, they built whole afternoons full of wonder, just for children to enjoy. And the cleverest sort of grown-ups. How did they do it?
Hello.
Let's see. Right from its founding in 1922, and for its first 40 years, the BBC made provision for children.
This is the BBC Home Service. Hello, children.
When I was a child, it was radio.
Children's Hour on the home service of the BBC, every night at 5 o'clock. And I was a great fan.
Larry the Lamb.
Oh, Mr. Grouser, sir. We were just going to look for you.
Look at me while you have the opportunity.
And Dick Barton.
Really good adventure stories, which you had to imagine, of course.
Swim for it, Jack, swim!
You know, the mind's eye stuff.
As television took off, Children's Hour made the switch. Seven long years of war meant no television at all.
We want nothing, nothing.
But when it resumed in 1946, children's programming was back, for 1 hour a week on Sundays. And Muffin the Mule made his debut.
Now, what are you doing behind there, Muffin? I see. A sly cup of my tea, as usual.
Children's television of that period was a bit staid, and it was adults addressing the audience, and addressing the audience as opposed to addressing the individual child.
I am now a traffic cop. They have to halt when I say stop. Right down.
Cecil McGiven, controller of programmes, said children are fascinated by television. And we're doing bits of scraps and bits here and there, but it's not being properly coordinated or organised.
In 1950, a children's department was set up to expand the range of shows on offer.
I think everybody in the department had different ideas about how we should do it. But everybody was dedicated to doing programmes for children.
I'd like to give you an idea of the sort of things you can see in our programs.
Was it Bill or was it Ben did whatever bad thing it was just then?
Andy Pandy. There isn't such a thing as Andy Pandies. Andy Pandy.
Are you waving to him, children?
It's Cracker Jack!
The only crime I have committed is that of a wish to serve your lordship faithfully and well.
I am going to tell you a story.
And of course, Tales of the Riverbank.
Hemi, come back. You're too young. Stand by. Prepare for takeoff.
How on earth did they film that? Must have been, heartbreakingly difficult to try and get a hamster to steer a boat. I mean, you can't get a hamster to do anything. Nothing much happened, but I loved it. I loved it.
Children's programmes had gone along quite happily until ITV was invented.
While the BBC sought to educate their child audiences, ITV went all out to entertain. Adventure series
And he's always helping people.
and westerns
Westerns are exciting. And Boots and Saddles, where you see soldiers and that, and the Indians, and plenty of action.
gave children a much wider choice of exciting and well-made programmes.
I can remember American culture coming into my life when I must have been about 5 or something like that, and we had the TV, quite young, so I was used to Andy Pandy and Muffin the Mule. And then one day, I saw American cartoons. I thought, wow, this is amazing.
Now, don't you give me any trouble, chicken. Chicken?
You can get better laughs out of them what you can other things.
ITV's output wasn't fettered by notions of public service broadcasting and lured away 75% of the audience.
Well, there's just one more thing to be done. What's that? Dig another grave.
In response, the BBC did away with anything deemed cosy.
Come on.
In came dynamic dramas,
You got a favourite programme?
Yes, thank God.
Z-Cars?
Yes.
and out went the budget for the kids' TV.
Listen, we'd have found you whatever you told us, and you afterwards, so understood.
With funds being funneled into winning back the adult audience, children's entertainment and drama were handed to the adult departments to manage.
Cue and cut.
164, 165.
Cue and cut.
Any remaining shows were absorbed by family programming. In 1964, the children's department was disbanded.
We felt betrayed by the BBC. I don't know why they did it, but we were the receiving end. And we thought, we'll show them. And that actually explains our attitude. Apart from a wonderful dedication to children, we wanted to give the management a black eye.
Stand by, studio. Let's have it quiet now, please. There's a lot of noise.
Despite the cuts, producers were determined to deliver fresh, contemporary and quality programming for under-5s.
We wanted to push a few boundaries and to loosen it all up and to do something which was much more appropriate to the time. The idea was to create a nursery school of the air with presenters much closer in age to the kids' own parents.
Here's a house. Here's a door. Windows.
1, 2, 3, 4, ready to knock.
Turn the lock.
It's play school.
Hello, I'm Virginia.
Hello, I'm Gordon.
Now we're inside, let's look around.
In developing the series, the creators consulted development experts
7 pegs along the wall.
and rang the changes with the new trends in 1960s child psychology.
For any young animal, including human beings, play is their first school. It's the means by which they learn. They're creating their personality, and that enlarges their sympathy and their understanding. It's just an essential part of childhood, I think, make-believe. And so that's how the title was chosen.
We sort of looked at the ingredients that you needed to have. The songs, the games, the get out into the wider world, and the storytelling. And it was just putting all that together into a new and different kind of format.
Look who's here.
It was very innovative play school, I think. There was definitely an air of pioneering.
Of course, the show's success relied on those ideas being translated to the audience through the interpretative skills of the presenters. Not those ones.
You close your eyes up tight like this.
Among those pioneers was film star Paul Danker and actor couple Phila Delore and Eric Thompson.
Oh, what a nice hat.
That's nice.
Do you see anything different about me? Yes. I've just stuck it on.
My husband was in children's television, doing children's things, so I got on.
He stays in his box.
Nepotism.
As long...
We did 5 programs in about 2.5 days. It was very tight. If you're working very hard under those circumstances, you always get hysterical, don't you?
And
1968 was a watershed year for the show.
January, February, March.
It was repeated in the afternoons. Play School became the keystone to kids' TV.
Oh yeah, my son loves it. We have to race home from school.
I still watch it. There's nothing else on television.
Hello.
We're making holes in this paper.
Now it's a sheet full of holes. Going to use that later.
Yes. In fact, the whole programme is full of holes and dots this week. There are even dots on the calendar.
We're going to hold it there.
That's the wrong position.
Can we put take 2 on the clock, please, Frank?
You can't listen to it. Hee! Big Ted and Humpty
Yes?
want to play a game.
I didn't mind doing all the songs. I knew every Nezra. What I couldn't tolerate was holding Humble and Big Ted and Little Ted and Jim. I couldn't do it.
Have one! Humpty and I have one.
Never mind, Big Ted.
And Cynthia, as a producer, said, when you do something you like, you're great. We love it. When you do something you don't like, it's rubbish. So you've got to get rid of that. And you've got to sell yourself to the programme. If you do that, we'll keep you on. If you don't want to do that, just tell us and we'll say goodbye. And I went out and I thought, why are you being bad at something? So I turned it round.
Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Doesn't get hurt, you know. He likes falling off.
And within the next few, I realised the integrity of the people who made Play School was so wonderful and so fabulous and so true that it became more and more and more of a pleasure to do. So I stayed for 16 years.
I picked up speed and tried catching up, but you were pedaling faster too. Riding along like a hurricane, honey, spinning out of view. You look so pretty as you were riding along.
I always thought if you wanted to educate a child, you could do it through music and comedy.
Sing the song.
The comedy and the music gets the attention, the focus, and then you introduce the education.
All I wanna do is wiggle my ears for you. All I wanna do is wiggle my ears for you.
When I first went in, it was terrible, terrible rhythmless music. And I remember them giving me a song called Dig, 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 There's a Man with a Spade and he's digging a hole in the road. And it was sung like that. And I said, look, can I change this a bit? And they said, well, if you must. And I said to Jonathan Cohen, give me a 12-bar in blues in B flat. And we ended up with dig, 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 there's a man with a spade and he's digging a hole in the road here. Bah! And they said, well, you can't do that. I said, well, that's that or nothing. So we did it. And all the letters came in saying, can Derek Griffiths do more of those pop songs? Because my kids were dancing around in the room.
Play School was the leading light that showered the schedules in sparkling spin-offs.
It really doesn't matter if it's raining or it's fine, just as long as you've got time. The P-L-A-Y, play away, play away.
Play Away was made to showcase the freewheeling talents of Brian Cant.
Now watch. Watch. Watch.
He was best at it. He was just like a little boy himself.
Play Away was hugely popular.
Can you make this piece of rope into 3 without cutting it?
Because it was aimed at a slightly older audience, you had jokes. You had slapstick.
You had Jeremy Irons.
It was refreshing.
We're a pair.
We're a pair.
What are we a pair of?
We're a pair of knickers.
And Bod was a Play School graduate too. Originally a picture book that was read on the show, it was only natural that a Play School star should help bring it to life.
The challenge really for me was the signature tune. So I found a jazz violinist who was a student of Grappelli. And I got him down to Olympic Studios in Barnes, and I got my penny whistle and I went do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And he started playing. And it was take 1.
Hello, says Bod. Hello, says Frank. Hello, says Beasley Copper.
Also, you had John Lemez's wonderful narration, which was just so classy. That was a privilege. It became a classic.
I've been having a lovely rest. And now I'm ready to tell you a story.
Play School's success meant that there was leverage to push for further funding and more time in the afternoon schedule, and the inspiration came from Play School's own storytelling strand.
Jackanory, 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 Jackanory. There was a little rhyme at the beginning of it, I remember, all those years ago.
I'll tell you a story about Jackanory, and now my story's begun.
I'll tell you another about Jack and his brother.
And now my story's done.
Jackanory.
Originally, it was a Whig political rhyme. It's all about going out and shooting a Tory and then shooting another one. So we thought that might cause a bit of flutter if anybody ever sort of cottoned onto that, but nobody ever did.
There was once a very rich gentleman, and he lived in a castle with a lot of fine lands.
Well, to start with, the actors were a bit dubious about doing it. 15 minutes is what, why should we, and, all that. But gradually, they began to realise, and so did their agents, that 15-minute solo exposure was no bad thing for any actor.
Jean and Peter went out one day with their dog, Scamp. They ran into a meadow and Scamp broke free of his lead.
It's a good show-off thing, Jackanory was.
What on earth's that, he asked. What, said John. That, said Peter.
And so many of my mates used to say, how do I get on that? Because the audience was huge. I mean, the whole of English childhood used to look at it.
So parents had much, much less time than in the past to read to their children.
The great thing about television is it's a classless thing. You are reaching out to all children regardless of, where their home is. And it's one of the great values of it, of course, is that children who may not have anyone to read them a story don't miss out.
I used to imagine one single child, and I'll come straight through the lens and talk to you. Did you hear about that? Did you? Come on, I'll tell you. And then you've got them. And if you get that one in your mind, then you've got all the others as well.
He didn't like to run till he was on the other side of the door, and then he bounded down the stairs and out through the main entrance to his taxi.
I don't know why he's just not on television on a Bernard Cribbins channel, actually, telling stories. Just there, on in the background, would be great, wouldn't it? So Bernard Cribbins, yes, he's telling a story, yeah, all day, yeah.
No, you don't, Buster.
Bernard doing Arabelle's Raven was a great favourite.
They heard the phone inside the house begin to ring.
Kenneth Williams, the voices were extraordinary.
Agar and Sachs have been expecting this kind of attack for years.
Not that he was easy.
You were to be put out of action by sleeping pills in your muffins.
Many, many people remember Judy doing a dog so small.
He opened his eyes and watched the light fade. And then, when it was so dark Ben could hardly see, he saw clearly.
She had then all the magic that she continues to have.
He saw that you couldn't have impossible things however much you wanted them. And if you didn't have the possible things, you had nothing.
Jackanory's traditional storytelling feel cloaked the programme makers' rebellious intentions. It provided an opportunity to introduce filmed sequences to illustrate the stories, a sidestep around the restriction on the children's department.
We were banned from doing drama, but we were allowed to do Jackanory. So with a bit of creative accountancy, they saved up the days of filming, which they didn't use on Jackanory. And then they did a Jackanory all on film, which was in fact a play. It was a drama with actors, but it had narration. So we hadn't broken any of the rules. This was just a way of telling a story, just happened to have a few actors acting in it and so on. So out of a lot of clever chicanery, children's drama was reborn.
The spin-off, Jackanory Playhouse, brought stories old and new to life.
Tis a witch.
and ran concurrently to the original, which had lost none of its popularity.
Telling stories, I think, is one of the most pleasurable things to watch, certainly to do. But it's also very valuable, I think.
Not long ago, there lived in London a young married couple of Dalmatian dogs, Pongo and Mrs. Pongo.
One of the most important things is you can't mess about with kids because you're telling stories to a child who maybe never heard a story before told with such intensity or joy or whatever it might be. And I still get it from adults. There's a black cab driver, Eastender. He looks in the mirror and says, "Do you know what, Jackanory, it made me want to learn to read," which killed me. It's wonderful.
There are things that the physical book can do that the television can't. But there are ways of bringing that same energy and enthusiasm right through the glass to say to somebody, this is a story. Do you want to know others? Go and find some others. Write your own.
We started off with play school, then we had Jack and Ori, then we had usually a cartoon.
Top Cat was weird because it had a very finished title sequence. Beautifully hand-drawn backgrounds, very, very, very painterly. So finished and so gorgeous, actually, looked lovely. And then it went into what was the production design, which is really stripped back. And I could never work out what all that was about. and it struck me years and years later. I thought, oh yeah, of course, they've pitched the series on this really lovely look. They've done that. They've used that sequence as the title sequence, and they've realised they haven't got the money to fulfil that all the way through the series. Yeah. So they've stripped the backgrounds to almost, what we call a UPA look, very, very stylised.
How many times have I told you to keep your hands off my phone?
Oh, how thoughtless of me, Officer Dibble. I didn't keep count. Should I have?
It had some hilarious wisecracking voices. It was like a sugar-charged drink.
As the afternoon went on and older children were coming in the programmes got more demanding. That was the theory anyway.
Vision On in the late 60s looks really natty, like a great design.
Vision On had grown out of For Deaf Children.
Hello, my name is Cyril Fry.
The programme developed in the 50s that used captions, but not signing. But viewers complained about its slow pace. It didn't look like other shows. When Top of the Pops began in 1964, it was a surprise hit with deaf viewers because of its energy. With this in mind, producers Patrick Dowling and Ursula Eason developed a concept, a stream of ideas. Vision On.
It didn't rely on the spoken word, and the visual excitement that was in there, sometimes quite anarchic, sometimes beautiful. It was basically for all children.
The format deliberately leapt around and took off on tangents to reflect a child's imagination. All anchored in the studio by Pat Kiesel, who signed...
Hello. Today's theme is circles.
And artist Tony Hart.
The only restriction, as far as we were concerned, is that nothing should really last more than a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So if you're thinking a 30-minute programme, we had to have more than 15 different items. And all the different people we used, who were kind of cottage industry animators, brought in lots and lots of new, innovative ways of making television. And another animation came with a couple of guys who were only students.
We did a very simple cell animation of a character that we called Aardman, because he was a sort of idiotic Superman.
Nobody would know he was called Aardman
No.
because, of course, this was basically a silent programme. So only we knew.
And we used them over a number of series.
All the stuff's happening whilst we're kind of in the sixth form. And we thought, there's got to be a better way than doing this darn 2D stuff. So we started using clay.
Yeah.
And that's when I think we realised that this technique of clay and models and stop frame, actually it's great fun.
We weren't good at it, but we had the luxury and the great opportunity to learn whilst getting it shown on TV.
I used to particularly like the gallery. I was always very judgmental. So when the gallery came up, I'd sit there saying, rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Quite good. Oh yeah, very good. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish.
We'd had 10 out of maybe 6,000, 7,000, so a lot of children were disappointed.
Thank you for sending us your lovely pictures. And I'm sorry that we can't return any, but all those we show get a prize.
And what happened to those ones that couldn't be returned?
I think they were recycled.
Vision On fulfilled the audience's interest in ideas. When the series came to a natural end in 1976, the team were determined to keep making shows to fuel that curiosity.
We were left well alone. We were down in Bristol anyway, and so we really did what we wanted.
Their next project for the 4:30 audience was built around Tony Hart.
You could say that this is a programme about making pictures with what isn't there.
He was a great gentleman. He'd been a captain with the Gurkhas, and he was a natural person, a natural performer.
This little bit of sponge.
And because he was so soft-spoken, children would then think, gosh, I'm actually sitting beside him.
Peel off carefully.
And he could take any object, or any series of objects, and put them together and make a picture.
What I liked about those programmes is you didn't need a big art cabinet. You know, you could make things out of things that you had in the kitchen or in your desk at school.
Tony was at the centre of Take Art, and they wanted a character to be a foil to him, a bit of a comedy foil. So could we come up with a character? And that's when we came up with little character Morph.
Yep, here's Morph. There he is. It's just plasticine. The simplest animation puppet.
Mess.
And I think for him it was in a way, a relief.
And stay there.
That you could do something which wasn't always doing art. You could have a bit of fun with this little imp on the desktop. So I think I was really very fond of him, as they became inseparable, I think, in the public's eye.
Tony Hart was the sweetest man I've ever met.
The plasticine army of morphs gathered outside Tate Modern yesterday in memory of one of Britain's favourite television presenters. Tony Hart died earlier this year, aged 83.
There was a spontaneous flash mob of morphs on the South Bank.
It was really quite an extraordinary outpouring of love, really,
Yeah.
for Tony.
The Vision On visionaries weren't just into art. Producer Clive Doig was also the originator of word puzzle programme Jigsaw.
I was asked to go to audition for Jigsaw when I had just had my first baby, the celebrated chanteuse and Strictly finalist Sophie Ellis-Bextor. Anyway, at that stage, she was weeks old. And so I went to see Clive Doig, and he sort of persuaded me to do it, really.
That was the word.
Clive is puzzle crazy, so there were always clues within clues and things you could follow over the whole series and things that you could follow that worked backwards.
Did you get it?
But if you didn't want to play, you could still have fun, and that was Clive's idea too. You could still watch a thoroughly enjoyable programme.
Janet, you should call him Pateri. After all, he is a pteranodon.
But the P ought to be silent.
Those P's certainly aren't silent.
She was amazing at being able to relate to these weird characters, including Adrian, who was quite mad.
Adrian Headley, who was the other presenter, did a character called Nosy Bonk, and actually that's the character that most people come up to me and say terrified them throughout their childhood, and I can sort of see why. As long as we keep the therapist busy, that's the main thing.
The lateral thinking extended to science and numbers.
The amazing thing about numbers is that we're surrounded by them, yet we're still fascinated by them. Go on then, open the pyramid.
I hate times tables, multiplication, division. That's why kids get fed up with this awful curriculum that we call maths and is really numeracy and nothing more.
Of course, you can't have a hydrogen bomb in a television studio. There's a limit to what they'll let you do.
Eventually, we were finding that we had enormous figures, tremendous, but 60% of our figure were adults, and many of them were old age pensioners. So for a herd, never missed a programme.
And if the practical exploration of academic ideas wasn't enough, there was old-school sporting endeavour.
When we went to a school, you'd obviously have the sports teachers there, and they'd put forward all the front row of the rugby team or the girls who played hockey best. And that's not what we were looking for. We were looking for characters and kids who'd work well together.
Through the tunnel, who keeps their hat on?
I mean, what a great idea. And these were kids' programmes that absolutely touched the nerve. They caught on.
I'm ready. Come and get it.
And the children's department grew and grew and grew.
Keith Chegrin here, just thought I'd drop in and tell you to watch Cheggers Plays Pop this Monday at 4:40 on BBC One.
Eureka!
The viewers' enthusiastic response vindicated the department's determination. They staked a claim for even more of the schedule space.
Monica Sims said, we do every kind of discipline, everything with the exception of news. And I thought, I wonder if there was a way of doing news for children. I went to see the head of news, and he said, well, I can give you a studio, and you can have the use of my correspondence when they've got nothing else to do.
The means to make the show was secured. Now it needed a presenter.
If you were in charge of children's programmes, what kind of changes would you make, if any?
Mostly children instead of adults.
You'd want more children involved in programmes?
The adults are taking over the world.
Search was the BBC's current affairs show for kids, and its host was John Craven.
Would you prefer Paul sitting in this seat
Yes.
to me?
Yes.
Oh.
I got a call to say that a news programme was being contemplated for children. And we had 6 weeks to see if we could get it right. And none of us had worked at television news before.
All the research, statistics and focus groups stated that it was doomed to failure.
Bernadette Devlin has tonight begun her 6-month jail sentence.
Children hated the news. It was a man in a suit talking, and it was boring. So it's a very dangerous enterprise, really. And if you lost the audience there, you were finished.
John, can you look in the camera, please?
Anything for you, Patrick?
First on BBC One, John Craven's News Round.
On Tuesday, the 4th of April 1972, John Craven's News Round went to air.
There's been a lot of reaction to the report from the government's Health Education Council, which said that pets could make you ill.
The lead story was something which affected children. In those days, corporal punishment was in the schools, and I said on the day that they abolish caning, no matter what else happens, that's the lead.
We've got 6 minutes 30, not 6:15. It was started on a shoestring. Everybody did things for free. We got a very distinguished foreign correspondents of BBC News to do items especially for Newsround, because most of them had children who didn't really know what their dads did for a living. This was the dad's chance to show their kids what they did.
This is Michael Burke for John Craven's Newsround in Yorktown, Virginia.
This is John Humphreys for Newsround in Salisbury, Rhodesia.
This is Martin Bell reporting for John Craven's Newsround.
Now and again, the foreign editor would say, I don't know how you managed to work this, John, because I have John Humphreys in Beijing refusing to close down the satellite until he's done his piece for Newsround.
These children live at the Sacred Heart Orphanage in Da Nang, once a principal American Army base. Of the 300 here, 50 are orphans whose parents have died in the war.
One way we had of explaining world events was through the eyes of children abroad who were experiencing this. And one of the very first examples of that was during the Vietnam War. And I asked Martin Bell, who was reporting from Vietnam, if he had time, could he do a little bit for Newsround about what it was like to be a child in a village in Vietnam right in the middle of the conflict.
American servicemen bring presents and help, but happiness for these and other orphans in Vietnam can't really begin till they find themselves in families where they're wanted and loved.
And he sent us this very moving film about these young children in this village. And it was the lead story on Newsround. And it was also exactly the same film was shown on the 9 o'clock news. And Martin couldn't really believe it. It just shows that at times, Newsround and the main news could be on exactly the same level.
Details are still coming in about the shock news that Pope John Paul II has been shot. 100,000 people may have died from starvation and disease in Ethiopia.
Choosing the right words is so crucial. Over the last 40 years, there have been some really horrible things happening just before 5 o'clock at night. And quite often, we're in loco parentis. There's no adult in the room at all. In fact, many times, adults have told me that their children have broken the news to them about something really important, and which they'd heard on Newsround.
It was a time when the children's department had a real significance.
Children's television became a kind of microcosm of adult television. You had lots of fun programs, you had competitions and games, you had serious drama like Grange Hill.
I'm not giving you my money.
And you had Newsround. And Newsround was always there at 5 o'clock in the middle of everything.
And that's all from Newsround for today. See you again at the same time tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
It was a very important part of many people's lives.
Back in the 1970s, channel chiefs were persuaded that factual and even fun programming justified increased spending for the weekday schedules. But fantasy proved a harder sell.
The problem is that drama is enormously expensive.
Take your leave, sir. No, Monsieur le Baron. This time it is you who are to take your leave.
You must be mad.
Not anymore.
It doesn't cost any less than it does for adult drama. But children's drama is vital. That's why we were so upset when it was taken away.
For a time, drama was brought in from across Europe and dubbed or narrated.
On white horses, let me ride away to my world of dreams so far away.
We were all besotted with white horses, and if pushed, I won't, but I can still sing the theme tune.
2 white horses, yes, all of that. Love that.
Standing there. Oh, Dimitri, Othello's running away again.
And the singing, ringing, dinging, flinging tree, yes.
I had nightmares about it into my late 20s.
We'll put the tree in here. What will happen to the fish?
The way that the princess behaved was so incredibly cruel.
Take them out, hurry up.
The visuals on it were very different, very, very magical. They were very creepy, and that would either give you nightmares or you'd be drawn in and fascinated, even though you didn't really understand a word.
As a kid, that really, really upset me. And the sound of the scene, I can hear it now. It's actually, I'm going to have a damn nightmare tonight.
But as the department proved themselves and budgets were negotiated, adaptations of classic English novels were made for the afternoon audiences.
Do people call you Al or Bert? I don't like my name being abbreviated.
And who designed sets when he should be doing his homework?
No quarrelling, please. Now look, we have the problem of the broken window.
It was great fun. It was great fun, except it was uncomfortable wearing these vests that the girls had to wear under their costumes to hold bosoms in place because we were all considerably older than the ages we were playing.
Oh, look! It's hatching.
I think there was an overall tendency of BBC Kids at that period to be a bit middle class. And I think it was something that a lot of us felt quite strongly about because that wasn't the way things were and the world was changing. And although I'm a huge supporter and fan of the classics, I did want to do more contemporary stuff that was more relevant to the lives of children as they were living it. Hence, Grange Hill.
Marion Edwards, William Graham.
It was controversial right from the beginning, and there was a lot of complaints. Suddenly, the powers that be kind of sat up and noticed what was happening, and Monica Sims defended it very, very strongly.
Don't let me ever catch you doing that again, understand?
Aside from Grange Hill, you had things like adaptations of Bernard Ashley's Break in the Sun, the very, very strong story about child abuse, which I'm not sure that you could do today.
What, have they sent you home to get it?
Yes, they have. Mr. Lanson's got tonight today, else I can't go.
Oh, yeah? Does he know about your mum's headaches? And about me being out of work? And about you wetting the bed? Were you dry last night?
Yes, I was. That's 2 nights in a row, like you said.
We always tried to keep the balance between the contemporary and the historical and the fantastic. And because there was enough money, we could do both.
I may bring more than my show. In my box are such delights.
Drama became an essential in the later part of the afternoon schedule. But the jewel in the crown was always Blue Peter.
Working late is one of the film editors. She's putting the finishing touches to the opening film for the next edition of Blue Peter.
Started by John Hunter Blair in 1958, Blue Peter was a 15-minute show aimed at 5 to 11-year-olds, bridging the gap between Watch with Mother and a magazine show for adults. Items on toys and animals were there from the start. But it wasn't until 1962 that the show hit its stride, revamped by new producer Biddy Baxter.
Biddy Baxter arrived, and she had a tremendous idea about what children wanted. She seems to have a private line through to all the 8-year-old minds.
3, 2, 1. And up we go.
Right from the very beginning, we wanted to produce a programme that really involved viewers at home, so that they weren't sitting there like cabbages and letting the programme swill over them, but we left them with something to do afterwards.
Just about 2 stone. You little terror.
It was exciting to join, and I thought it was terribly important to have a logo. And so we commissioned a young, up-and-coming, unknown artist, Tony Hart, to produce an emblem. And we had this ship on everything connected with the programme.
The music changed and the opening sequence changed, and in came the badges, of course. That was another thing we had.
I think pretty much the same lines as John go for this suit. It's called a jumpsuit. It's been designed specially for men by a designer called
Gloria, where's your badge? Oh, put the badge. I always thought we should have one tattooed. I mean, it was almost a sackable offence if we'd done a film and we hadn't put our badge on. So you had to be very careful. That was one of Biddy's laws. You wear the badge.
It's a bit odd.
Oh, but that's the funny bit. He gives the big bit to Sarah, and I get the little bit.
Doesn't matter.
She's
It
always
doesn't
worked
matter.
out.
That's
Oh,
not
it's all the same.
Just apply your mind and stop panicking.
Biddy was the fulcrum, and all of us knew perfectly well that however much we bumped around in the ether, she was in the middle, and that was good to know.
She believed in Blue Peter. That was the important thing. And I think, to a large extent, we did as well.
But it was the feats of daring do which proved the presenter's commitment to bringing us great TV and kept the viewers hooked.
John did some incredibly brave things. We never had any insurance for any of those things. I mean, if John had fallen off Nelson's column, I mean, goodness knows what would have happened.
Yeah, it's a bit dirty. Never mind. I don't suppose anybody will see that.
The best job in television, without any doubt.
Here we go.
I hated parachuting. I mean, I really hated it. But I also liked the fact that I hated it and I could still do it.
Well, I'm only a beginner, so I'm going to race 2 other beginners.
All 3 of us were in different power boats.
Chucking it down, I just couldn't go any faster. What a fantastic battle this was turning out to be. It was great, and I was loving every second of it until I heard a terrific crash.
And we hit a sleeper. We turned round, and there was no back of the boat, because the sleeper had flipped the engine up, which actually missed my back, I was told, by about that much. I mean, it could have sliced down the whole of my back.
What had started out as a sport had, in a fraction of a second, turned into a near disaster.
I wasn't pulled out immediately. It was, hang on, stay there, no, just stay in the water, we'll just get the camera ready and we'll film you. So I was there shaking from the shock of this having happened and sort of doing a piece to camera in the water.
I'm no cold and rather wet. I'm shaking a bit.
They were fun, but I think of all the things I'm probably the most proud of with Blue Peter, I would say it was those Christmas appeals.
Look at this. We've got right up to the 10,000 mark, which is 2/3 of the way towards the final target of 15,000 parcels for our Blue Peter tractor for Africa. I think it's absolutely fabulous, and let's hope that we can get it for Christmas.
There had been a sort of tradition before I joined that shortly before Christmas, the Blue Peter studio was filled with every imaginable kind of toy. And it was a rather uncomfortable feeling, you know, what's in it for me? What am I going to be given at Christmas? And we thought it was a really good opportunity to explain to the audience that there would be some children somewhere who weren't going to have a nice Christmas, who weren't going to have Christmas presents.
Well, this is the Blue Peter hamper, so you're going to tell everybody what's going to happen with it, Val?
Yes, OK. Well, Chris and I discovered that quite a few children this Christmas wouldn't be getting any toys. We were rather worried about that, and we thought we'd like to do something about it. And then we had an idea, and we thought maybe you'd all like to help by sending in a toy.
In the following years, the strategy changed. The viewers were asked for things that they could easily lay their hands on. Rubbish that could be converted to cash.
No sooner had we finished the last line of the address than the envelope started arriving pretty much. It was always really astonishing.
You didn't have to have money for this. It wasn't about money. It was about doing. It was about collecting. It was about thinking. It was about coming up with ideas.
If it was collecting stamps, one child could send 1 stamp, so they felt they contributed. Another could send bookloads of stamps.
Whether it was helping at home or overseas, Blue Peter viewers surpassed the targets year after year.
To tell a child that they can effect huge change, where you are perhaps getting glimpses of some shattering pictures of children who are starving, to feel that you can effect a change, and then you see films where other children are getting involved, and it becomes the effect of collective action. For all the sort of apolitical aims of Blue Peter, that in itself is a truly pure political act, isn't it? That as a collective, you are able to make a change for the better. And the value of that, it's priceless, isn't it?
Each afternoon of children's viewing marched inevitably towards the evening news. But in 1965, the schedulers hit on a way of delaying the inevitable.
This is Mr. Rusty. He used to be a happy man, but now he's sad. There's no magic in life anymore.
Made in France by Serge Danot and Britt Ivor Wood, the rights to Le Manège Enchanté were bought by the BBC.
Voyons ça un peu pour le père Pivoine. Eh oui, c'est bien pour moi. Voyons, oh tiens, mais il y a quelque chose écrit derrière. Cher père Pivoine.
The beautiful French animation required rewriting with an English-language script. And the man tasked with the translation was Play School favourite Eric Thompson.
A Grundig machine came to the house, to his study, with 2 huge wheels on. And the film would just go through from one wheel to another. And a tiny, tiny little screen in the middle.
Who are you? Said Mr. Rusty. I'm Zebedee. Zebedee. And what do you do? Said Mr. Rusty. Magic.
The animation is simple, I would say, politely, because they don't sort of
They don't emote,
do they? No, they wave their heads
but they don't,
and they wave their arms, but they're not conveying any emotion at all. Which is why Eric could write different stories.
The French was absolutely impossible.
Et maintenant, voulez-vous voir ce que Margot a vu? Oui.
Horrible.
Zebedee asked Florence what she would like to do today.
Thompson redid it. Consequently, it's very, very quiet.
She would like to do something restful, like picking flowers.
His choice of words is heaven.
What's your name? Said Dougal. Brian, said the snail. Brian? Said Dougal. Snails aren't called Brian. Snails are mollusks.
The resulting combination of wry writing and Thompson's tones charmed children of all ages, especially those returning from work and switching on to catch the headlines.
Come down, Dougal, said Florence.
Because it was in that transition space between the end of children's television and the news, almost regardless of what age you were, you would see it.
All the birds are up, said Florence. That's their problem, said Dougal.
It was so well timed by the BBC because it was just before the news, so Mum was getting the tea ready, Dad was coming home, and the kids were out of the way being occupied. Very clever.
The game was sort of written for adults, or rather, let's say it wasn't written for children. It was just written for an intelligent audience of any age, I suppose.
Really? Why does everyone have to be so stupid?
While the kids were quite happy to take the stories at face value,
I knew that would happen.
the grown-ups looked for deeper meanings, and a myriad of myths sprang up around the show.
Treasure.
To some, it was a political satire on the French.
Called the dog Dougal because we lived in Scotland at the time, and he was, as far as I was concerned, a Scottish dog. But the French were very upset because they thought it was de Gaulle, and we were being rude about their president.
What?
To others, it was all a psychedelic trip.
I'm afraid she's been affected by all those poppies she's been eating.
I mean, Dylan was supposed to be full of drugs and things.
I'll sleep on it.
My husband wouldn't know a drug if it stood up and shouted.
Where's my leading lady?
And to one or two, it was all about Mrs. Thompson, in the shape of Ermintrude.
I'm a film star.
Because I'm theatrical. And wear hats.
What would my mother say?
It was rubbish. I don't think any of them were based on anything.
When in 1967 the BBC moved the Magic Roundabout to an earlier slot in the children's schedule, there was a national outcry.
Pay freeze, £50 travel allowance, high taxes, and now you've altered the time of the magic roundabout. What else are we children over 30 going to be deprived of?
It's time for bed.
It was clear that this 5 minutes had become a focal point in the nation's viewing habits, a much-needed drop of feel-good before facing the news.
That was our target. That was the holy grail, to get that 5 minutes before the news slot.
I kind of like the bizarreness of the clangers. I like their, trying to decipher their language.
The clangers spoke unto every nation in a musical language. But we still understood every syllable.
The clanger scripts were written out in full in English, and we played it. So was the bloody thing stuck again?
They're very gentle and live their own lives, and I think they would be very alarmed if they got tangled with our sort of life, the life of earthly civilization.
The contract to run Britain's main satellite television network has been awarded to a group backed by some of the country's most successful companies.
We used to have over movies.
As soon as satellite came in, that was the end of the golden era of children's television.
Often the funding for the cable stations came from the States. So you've got the rules of business now operating as distinct from the idea of service.
Increasingly, the child audience were seen as consumers, as TV shows were created to sell toys, games and books. And in this new era of children's television, appetites are fed on demand and round the clock.
When we were doing it, kids watched for about an hour and a half. It rolled over into the news, it rolled into reasonable current affairs, and I think kids got a better chance of getting a nice rounded education, not from us, but from what they saw and what they were watching at that time.
Hello. Don't mind lining your shop. Not at all. I want to get down, Val.
You're handing your audience something quite precious when you're giving them entertainment aimed just for them, because childhood is pretty short. And if it works for them, like all the programmes that we remember, they will remember it. They'll remember it in a way you never will, really, with your adult viewing memories.
I'm not coming down until you give me that book.
It was so important, children's television, because of its richness. It covered all aspects. So I think it did a good service.
Do you know what I think is absolutely marvellous about most people who've worked in different generations of children's television? We all think we were in the golden age.
Goodbye, children.
I know we've come a long way. We're changing day to day. Tell me, where do the children play?